So it has started getting recorded now. Okay, so as I said earlier, I mean, I wish that, um, we would not have seen this time in our lives. I mean, we used to talk about Spanish flu and things like that, and then we have this almost 100 years later, this pandemic. I used to have nightmares at times, because I have been through such fieldwork where disasters have struck in terms of floods, in terms of earthquake, cyclones, and then human-made disasters like political violence, communal violence, and all. So it has its own way of touching your lives, or rather affecting your lives in some manner. So, but then for it to happen in general for people, I mean, the entire world, and almost entering our own, homes, this disaster, and that's something which appears to be unreal. So for me, it's a very unique experience. What used to be the field for me, now it has become more or less a challenge for the entire family as it is entering our homes, actually. But then, yes, the only thing we have, and that's also the power of humanities, I would say, that despite whatever people think about humanities or its status. I mean, my father himself being an engineer, and he was not of a great opinion about myself joining psychology and all. But the fact remains that much of what we see all around us in today's time, I mean, it's something like, the only way perhaps we can understand whatever is happening all around us, it's not in terms of biological or medical reasons or trajectories of what we are seeing today, right? We don't know much. The second wave, third wave, whatever. I mean, God knows, even WHO doesn't know much, you know. Although we do have some data, and on that we are running some multivariate analysis and trying to get to what may happen later. But you never know what's really going to happen. But in terms of lives getting affected, humans getting affected, how they are dealing with that, what are the ways in which one can be reminded of Gandhi's simple uh, take on human life, which was all about that there is everything for humans as far as their need is concerned, right? But when you start looking at it from the point of view of greed, then you don't have much. So it looks like almost for the greed of some set of people in the world, the entire world is getting affected. It is not happening for the first time. We used to hear about poverty and how that is politicized in Africa and other parts of the world, maybe Asia also. But then now it's 21st century, and we are perhaps seeing a radical form of that. So all of it perhaps brings us very, close to the way in which human sciences may tell us something more, at least to try and figure out what's really happening and what next, and also simultaneously to take care of our own lives, to take care of our own sanity in some sense, because these are highly disturbing times, highly distressing times. Okay, so only yesterday I was delivering a talk on grounded theory methodology, and I was so disturbed, in fact. So I began with actually, sharing my own feelings at that time. That it's more like having a sense of solidarity. It might have been a refresher course. I sent a link of that on that WhatsApp too. But much more than anything else, it's somewhere the those positive energies, for want of a better phrase or word, I would use that only. There is some element of that strength and positivity that we are, by nature we are composed of like that, and it's a time when perhaps these things can be connected and are connected in some manner. So then the question, or facing life or death becomes, I would say, I would say not easier, but maybe more we can take it in our stride, and we can live in the moments that we are. So let's hope that all these spikes that you see on that graph of COVID positive, and touch wood, the fatality is not as great, but still it's very alarming, because 3 lakh per day would mean that even if it is like 1%, it means so much. So yeah, so let's hope that that comes down. There are many stories regarding that. This is not the time to share all those things. On a different platform, I do share with my friends, and particularly the way these become, even vaccines become political, right? The virus becomes political. So there are different ways in which, as I said, every disaster opens up a university for us to look at our own lives. It depends upon us whether we are really ready to do that. Okay, so building on whatever understanding that we have developed regarding qualitative research, to me, as whatever little experience I have in the field of social science, I would say that there are simply two pillars of it. One is dialogic partnership, because any question in the entire journey of yours as an academic, as a researcher, that is asked about, I mean, in whatever terms it may be asked, validity, authenticity, scientific rigor, right, generalizability, and all those things. The story comes down to dialogic partnership. So that becomes one important pillar. And the second one, of course, is how systematically, not that you do not have to write about developing dialogic partnerships or struggle for that systematically, but then when you come to analysis, obviously the steps or the procedures that you could follow, or the challenges that you could face there, or what unique contribution your study makes in that way. So that becomes important. That's why it becomes the second pillar. So, and yes, you can actually contribute even with small, whatever little study that you are able to do. When I published my work in 2010, in qualitative health research. So I was appreciated by one of the stalwarts in the field, Alan Radley in the UK. And when I sent him my work, he said that he's not a big fan of grounded theory. But the way I had presented my findings, not in terms of categories, but in terms of vignettes, right? If you look at that paper, although there are categories, that you develop on the basis of initial focused Excel coding, but you have a choice. And I exercised that choice, although that was not prescribed, but I chose to weave all those categories in the vignettes, okay, in those personal stories of people. So that was something that was appreciated by Ellen Radley, and Ellen Radley's words. I mean, that was something. It was a huge, encouragement for me. It's very, very much confidence booster in terms of how, I was looking at research at that time. So these have been some of the important people, besides Katie herself and the other ones, who I am reminded of when we are talking about whatever we have learned in this course. Okay, so this being more or less the final sort of class on learning about methodology. So let me, okay, just a second, take you towards. Yeah, what this article has to tell us, regarding what one goes through as a researcher, and partly some of us might be able to see some of the phases that a researcher goes through, which Ponterotto and Grieger have talked about in this article that I'm presenting, parts of it today. And then we'll be looking at the report writing part two. So, that's the reason it has been it has been titled as Communicating Qualitative Research Effectively. That's Ponterotto and Grieger. The article comes from the Journal of Counseling Psychology. So that's another APA journal. It's a very good journal. very high standard. Okay, so it begins with something very interesting, and I'm presenting because many of us might relate to this, and that's research identity transformation process. Okay, so what does it tell us about it, and why is it important for effectively communicating qualitative research? In some ways, it helps us locate ourselves in our journey as a researcher, right? And the first thing that comes up is the phase of disillusionment. What does it tell us? Basically tells us that initially qualitative research is taken as less than quantitative research, right? I mean, that's what we generally think. And I think we have discussed this, debated this so many times in the class, because many of our questions come from our uh, training in science with certain meanings or certain paradigms. Now we can call that to be paradigms of science that we are trained in. So at least until class 12, we do, if we do science, that we are implicitly or explicitly given certain messages about what is the nature of science or what is the nature of scientific understanding. And that tells us that anything that is not objective or neutral, observation, if these are not possible, if it is not generalizable universally, for example, the value of G, small g. So you go to the North Pole, you go to the equator, there might be some change. Yes, there would be. But that about that too, you do have certain formula, right? So GMM by R square, where G is capital G. So small g is equal to GMM by R square. So it basically means that you can calculate the value of small g anywhere, right? Similarly, for any sort of any object or bodies in this universe, that formula does work. So we are trained in these kinds of images of science. So what we face is something like this. And now that it is almost the last few meetings that we have, you may recall some of the questions that we used to have in the beginning, was of this flavor also, right? That in what ways we can call, many things are subjective, many things are not as sort of concrete as we are familiar with, in terms of formulas, in terms of concept, in terms of statistics and all. But what happens gradually, reflections on being trained in positivist and post-positivist paradigm enable researchers take qualitative research as different from quantitative. So that's a marked difference. So first of all, I say that, okay, this is no good. I mean, it doesn't come anything, in any ways near to what we are trained in, excuse me, as a quantitative researcher. So it doesn't come any way, closer to that standard, right? So it's less than quantitative research. But then gradually we start looking at that, what is this quantitative research, by the way, right? What are the assumptions, what are the criteria or parameters of rigor that it is telling us about? What are the assumptions, by the way? And many such reflections have been made. I mean, we are not the first set of people who are doing it, right? If you go to Frankfurt School of Critical Theory way back in early 20th century, you're going to find something very similar. People were in critical theory in Frankfurt School. They were not just talking about the understanding of reality more as observer being the tabula rasa, but more in terms of the adversity that the world was facing even in the early 20th century, right? Early 1910s or 20s, when Frankfurt School, or maybe during that time, around that time. So World War One, a whole lot of miseries in terms of international relations or lives of people. So the question was more in terms of how those issues are somewhere touched, right? So such sets of reflections have been there, as far as understanding about science and scientific knowledge within social sciences or natural sciences is concerned. So once we do that kind of a reflection, we find that, okay, there are certain sets of assumptions which guide quantitative research. The only thing is that these are taken to be the standard, you know, which is like, okay, these are the parameters. If you fit in, very good. If you do not, then So that is something which we tend to realize, and we quickly also realize then that no, I mean, for several reasons, which we can now take as ontological as well as ideological. Ontological, why? Because right in the beginning of this course, we learned that the nature of human science data is not like something, like this laptop or this image that you see on the, on Zoom. It's something which we try to approximate, and which would be extremely difficult to be, taken to be a sort of, a direct imprint of reality out there and on our head as that tabula rasa it just gets imprinted. No, it doesn't happen like that. So we do have certain faculties of mind. We do have certain ways in which we look at our world, and somewhere we tend to approximate what is happening with people even today in COVID-19 with the help of development of meanings, certain meanings that are shared by our participants, certain meanings that are brought to the dialogue by us, and that's the interchange that shapes our understanding. So it becomes a completely, I would say, different set of assumptions that start guiding our work. So if you look back in this course also, you might find that okay, something similar might have been happening, god knows. Okay, that you start looking at it and start feeling that yes, although your teacher was, more or less, very much vociferous in terms of no, I mean, if you are in this course, you got to understand, forget about qual or con, remember that. When I used to say that, first of all, let's try to focus on the very nature of human science data. What is the nature of it? Is it something like this paperweight that is there in front of me, or this mobile phone, or so there is something else? Although you may still develop certain models and test it, no doubt about that, considering this life or this human being to be a set of interacting variables. That's a different thing. So you find that how the dust particles are joined together here on this earth and there on Mars, when you send that, in the same manner you can start studying human life too. There's a choice that we have. Doesn't mean that that takes away the very nature of human science data to be more amenable with the help of the dialogue, the dialogic partnership that we looked at, and because that helps us get closer to the person's meanings or experiences, and how these are uh, we are able to somewhere get close to that with that trust, and then also enter into a meaning making exercise that happens within the interview, also within the process of analysis, right? So in this entire process, a bit of change, at least in the beginning, comes up. From there on, you also start looking at several journals that are publishing it. Okay, there are qualitative research journals, at least I would say 2 dozen of them, which are very high standard, in terms of not just impact factor, but in terms of what they publish and the way they have informed policies all around the world. If I mean, if not human lives per se, because in today's time, I can just quote from my own discipline, maybe from various disciplines, one can see that how um, people have started talking about the very structures, the social institutions or political structures that shape human life. In today's time, when you talk about stress and coping, for example, so coping is no more individual. People talk about that as collective coping. People talk about that as radical healing, right? Why radical healing? Because you cannot talk about people's recovery or people's moving on in life without considering the hierarchies in which they are placed, right? Whether it is gender, race, religion, caste, ethnicity, whatever, right? So that's the change that has come up. So once you start reading that, you come up to a different kind of a stage, and that Ponterotto and Grieger have termed as commitment, considering new paradigm not mere alterations of positivist and post-positivist paradigm, but different research worldview of equal legitimacy and value. So that is something which some researchers may come up to, and the whole, if I'm if I can, help all of us get reminded of that, please recall that in Guba and Lincoln's article, when we looked at training part, right, it basically told us about resocialization into the whole understanding of the meaning of science or what is scientific within natural science or social science, particularly in social science, right? So once you do that, it's a different kind of stage that you are in. And then comes another phase when you are into some months or some years of training or learning. And when you once you engage in that learning by doing the basic features of qualitative research, partly we engaged in that throughout this course. I mean, I didn't give you anything, with the help of jargon that fine, okay, this is constant comparison. What is constant comparison? It basically means like this. This is exactly what Glaser and Strauss says, or this is exactly what Katie Sharma says. We tried to do that. Even now we'll be doing that in our NSEM project, right? So once you do that by once you learn that by doing, you tend to get closer to having more and more confidence, and that's what mastery actually means. And towards the end of your, let us say, work, yes, you do develop some mastery. And then comes the gray hair thing, which is more like a person like me, who always has some agenda, because I firmly believe in the fact that whatever little we are able to learn about our realities, let's say about my own understanding about my own parents or my family, my future, what's happening to the society, nation, my students. As a dean of this institute, several things which come up as a challenge. So all those things, you know, somewhere uh, also helps you not only look at this just as a course on methodology, but also as very, very important windows that students can come up to and actually, bring in a whole lot of transformation in their own lives and in the lives of others. So that's the agenda that I come up with, and I'm being very honest about that. And that's the meaning of advocacy. So, being a resource person and a collaborator for fellow like minded researchers, right? So, there are times now, in fact, I'm reminded of a story which one of my colleagues in the US told me, and that was about Veena Das. So, Veena Das used to teach anthropology at Delhi School of Economics, and from there she shifted to Johns Hopkins, and she is a professor of anthropology and philosophy there. And so one of my colleagues in the US, he was telling me that, okay, he was listening to her lecture, and that was on social suffering and marginalization and all. And he was saying that, okay, paradoxically, the people who were sitting there and who were like, more of a positivist and more of, people who believed in multivariate and statistics and looking for variables and all in that entire lecture of hers, I mean, they perhaps most, or rather most certainly were feeling marginalized, in the sense that how powerfully she was putting forward both ontological and ideological reasons why it's important to look at human lives in an ethnographic way, or in a manner where their experiences or worldview would matter, right? So that's the meaning, or that's the example of advocacy that comes to my mind. And uh, if I can recall why I'm saying that I do have an agenda, if you look at our earlier classes, when we also looked at the when we also derived the discursive framework, from that initial exercise. Please recall that when we wrote it for ourselves and we tried to answer the question that suppose you had to write this in front of a in front of the director, or director had been the person who would have asked you this question, had your responses been different? And some of us had said yes. No. Even I would have said yes to that. And then before our mother, before people who are going for coffee in the evening after the whole lot of classes that we have entire day. So all such things basically had also told us that what really matters is that whenever we are sharing something, so our sharing or our talk is not just a representation of discourse independent reality, something like this bottle or something like this laptop or things like that, that even before you might have started talking about it, does exist. But that doesn't happen with many of the ideas about our experiences, right? The way we happen to talk about our experiences, right? Both the socialization part, the way we have learned about our experiences, the way we have undergone that, and simultaneously who we are speaking to. So that does matter. So in that way, any communication also has a purpose. So I'm always, or rather, I tend to remind myself always that whenever I'm opening up or opening my mouth, or to speak something in these classes, it's not devoid of that agenda or that a purpose. You know, so the purpose always has been this, that in any way, tomorrow if you got to be with me or be on your own, be with me. Basically, what I mean to say is that be with a like-minded researcher, or maybe with a group of researchers, or maybe in a department where you are able to, or you can, in fact, build a department where you would like to do this kind of research that somewhere is concerned about the worldview or the experiences of people, as simple as that. um, you stand firm on your grounds. Okay, that you, it's almost like in the court of law, when you start speaking, it's something like you and your client versus the entire world, more or less, or maybe entire nation, right? That's how it is. And I was so surprised when one of my friends who knows about law and Constitution of India and the court of law, he said that, okay, this is what happens. I said, my goodness, this is scary, man. So I'm speaking for something, and it's something like me against the entire, let us say, state. So, for example, if there is a person who is fighting a case and might have been a victim of whatever, in one's office. So the case is not just about two persons. It becomes more or less about the person and the entire government policies, or government, because it's a government employee who is sort of who has been denied certain kinds of rights. So a parallel process happens here. So when you start speaking about your work, or once you start formulating your own research problem and start working on it, it's more like defending your work and your ideas before the entire world. And that's exactly what my attempt has been. So advocacy, the example of that from my side would be some of the colleagues like me who understand, perhaps who have gone through some of these stages, earlier stages of disillusionment, commitment, advocate mastery, and then they are more or less convinced about the power or the strength of some of these paradigms, including the paradigms that happen to tell us something about dialogic partnership, as well as the kind of analysis that is possible. So, in a way, Ponterotto and Grieger's article tells us something about the way in which we are socialized into this kind of research, and once our study comes up to a point where we can start writing about that in a systematic manner, and that's where he takes us towards the structure of research report. Obviously, it begins with the title. All of us know about that. But why is it important? Because generally, we take it for granted that, okay, title mein kya hai bhai? I mean, it's like a real thing would be in the abstract, right? Or maybe in the results part of the section. No, title is important for two reasons. One, uh, it is perhaps the first window that you create as an invitation to the readers to look at your work. So it depends. I mean, the kind of words that you use in that title, it not only represents your study, but simultaneously brings attention to the kind of novel ideas or the novel insights that you might have generated through your work, right? So look at the title of that Ellingson's article. Then you know how I feel, right? And these were given in double quotes. That was perhaps the way to not only tell the world about what you can expect, or what is the essence of her work that she was presenting in that article, but simultaneously also telling younger researchers or maybe other researchers also regarding why you should be reading this work, right? Why it becomes so important. So many ideas come to our mind. One of the things that one can understand that, okay, it is definitely about subjective experiences or realities of a person, right? And you also get a bit deeper that, okay, these are also about certain important concepts like reflexivity, empathy, compassion in doing ethnographic fieldwork. Or maybe, even when you're doing any good qualitative research like autoethnography or ethnography, right? It does attract some attention to you in terms of if your need is of that kind. For example, when I was doing my ethnographic work and when I found this article way back in 2002, right? One of my colleagues found that. And when we read it together, it was like, oh my goodness, this is something that we were looking for for so many months or years, maybe. So that was 18 years ago. So that's the importance of the title. Let's not take it lightly. So, number one, it does tell us about the essence of our work. And number two, we still have some choice in how we build it, how we word it, right? Because it's important that people who are looking for similar kind of work, they get a hang of it even in the title itself, right? So that's why it does matter. The other important thing is that title should not be very long. It should not be sort of repeated words should not be there in that, right? Repetitions need to be avoided. And the standard thing is that you should not be having more than 12-word title. Although you may, I mean, it's something like one also goes up to 15 words, it's okay. But beyond 15, it becomes too long. Unless you have very strong reason to do so, to say so, I mean, we tend to avoid that. So 12 to 15, even 12 for some people is, sort of standard parameter. But I at times have, violated that and I've gone up to 15 also. Okay. And then you have got the abstract. Now, what is this thing called abstract? One thing that we must realize that here we have this opportunity to summarize everything in terms of what one can expect. So, right from the goals or the research objectives that you have, to the methodology that you adopted, to the findings, and then implications. So these four or five things become very, very important. In fact, if you go to some of the journals, they would want you to write in these, in this particular format. So uh, you got to write about the aim, got to write about the methodology or the method, they would call it at times, and then insights or findings, then implications. So these minimum four things that they would expect. So that's the meaning of abstract. So title good, yes, you got attracted to that because you were looking for something, something like that. That's good. But then comes the point that, okay, how is it built? What all things one can expect from that particular work. So in general, that's the format that is utilized. And then you begin the work generally with introduction. There are times when you don't even write the section heading as introduction, right? It may be some critical idea that comes to your mind. So, for example, in Ellingson's article or other article, you might not have found the section head called introduction, but it begins with the basic ideas, right? Basic rationale, for which you are doing it. And in that light, when you look at the qualitative projects, right, it begins with locating the researcher's motivational, experiential, and paradigmatic standpoint. Doesn't mean that it doesn't talk about the research, I mean, the idea for which the research was initiated. No, it is definitely mentioned. But then what motivated me or you to take up that particular idea? I mean, that's something that also becomes very, very critical. And if you recall from first couple of lectures, first couple of classes in the course, you would realize that why it begins like this. One of the basic tenets of qualitative research tells us about locating the researcher. The researcher's what? Researcher's motivational, experiential, and paradigmatic positions. And besides there, in introduction, talking about your rationale for your objectives, besides writing about objective, which is a part of the section before the method. You write about choosing the method that suit the research questions and the research paradigm. Okay, so please recall that locating the researcher and then the research ideas or research questions. And then after research questions, you also look at the paradigm that would suit the set of research questions. And then comes the question of method, that what method would be suited to this, whether phenomenological or a combination of phenomenological and ethnographic, or whether a combination of case study and ethnography, whether it's a combination of ethnography and grounded theory, or maybe just grounded theory. So, or maybe narrative approach. I think I told you about one study on creative process, which was just done on two people because it was based on life story research, right? So that researcher, provided the whole understanding regarding the motivational, experiential, paradigmatic standpoint. I mean, before that, objectives, and then paradigmatic standpoint, and then talking about the suitability of narrative or the life story research, where two persons life would be studied and analyzed in details. So that's the thing that you got to write about. And then finally, okay, so before that, I just yeah, so illustrating the process of analysis. So this is something which I am talking about from my own experience, because when I started publishing, I was I could also learn this, that as much as possible, if you're able to stick to memo writing, please recall that from that previous couple of classes activities that we have had, we were looking at the reasons of raising some of the initial codes to be the focused codes, or at that time we were looking at the indispensable codes, right? So once you are able to talk about those important decisions that you took, right, in the process of analysis, there are very, very strong chances that your study is going to be looked at in a very, very much favorable manner. Why? Because this is something that adds rigor to your report. People would like to know. Fine, I mean, it's okay that you have come up with these categories, but the point is how, right? What is the rationale? What were the processes? What were the questions, right, that you encountered in the way? So the more you are able to throw light on that, which is nothing but illustration of the process of analysis. And dear friends, we have gone through that in the last couple of classes with the help of asking some very, very critical questions, right? Because these are, I would say, pivotal in any good qualitative research analysis. People are going to ask you, in fact, your peers, your teachers, your students later on are going to ask you that, sir or ma'am, what gives us this confidence that, okay, these are the ones which are final categories? As simple as that. And that's exactly where you find that memo writing or memorandum writing becomes very important, date wise, right? Anyway, so my experience says that I mean, I almost very quickly developed a habit that besides looking at title, abstract, introduction, locating the researcher, and so on, I do not miss that point of illustrating the process of analysis. How was coding, initial coding taken up, whether it was paragraph to paragraph, line by line, incident by incident? How was it followed? Obviously, for us in this course, I insisted that you go by line coding, because in the beginning it becomes important. You might miss certain things. You might take certain things to be trivial, which might not be as trivial, right? So, but then if you go for paragraph by paragraph or incident by incident coding, what's the rationale? What was the reason for that? All those things, if you look at, if you devote time to meticulously write about those details, right? And they are not very difficult one. You simply have to ask we simply have to ask ourselves that, okay, if we took this decision, okay, then what informed these decisions? Initial coding, focused coding, Excel coding. When we are looking at some of the codes getting subsumed under an overarching focus code, for example, I mean, what reason are we giving for that? Right? Do we find that these are on a continuum? Do we find that okay, there are some aspects of this subcodes which are a part of the overarching code, and that's why we are clubbing it sort of as a subcode of an overarching code? So all such illustrations help you convey the scientific rigor of your work. Please remember that we had in the first couple of classes, first 2 to 3 classes. Also, I also made a presentation regarding the criteria of rigor, and that's where, besides reflexivity and originality and transferability, we also were talking about credibility, right? Which is nothing but audit trail. That how systematically, step by step, you came. You began your work by locating the researcher, and from there on, the building research relationship, and then collecting data, and then the process of analysis, right? And within analysis, these things. So that is the meaning of credibility. The credibility of your work gets a big boost when you start talking also about the process of analysis, and you illustrate how you did initial coding, how you did focus coding, how some of the codes were raised to be focus codes, how some of the examples of how some of the codes could get subsumed under a broader one or an overarching one. And that helps us get closer to the um, whole process of the meaning making, or scientific meaning making, that was a part of the qualitative research process. From there on, you do have a choice of presenting results through a series of distinct categories or the same woven in cases. The latter is the one that I prefer, which I've done several times in my work, because I feel that it also brings some coherence. I mean, it's good that we have developed some understanding regarding the categories, but then there are times when we may choose to do it in a manner where these categories may be woven in the cases. Cases here would mean the life stories of the person, whatever little you are able to learn with the help of interviews about their lives, right? So these are the choices that you have as far as presenting the results is concerned. I'm also reminded of, I think, Aswati's article, which we did on the analysis of final solution, the documentary. I think there we presented it category wise, because that helped us convey, the various ways in which um, people's distress or social suffering could be understood with the help of that documentary. So both the choices are there for us. And then comes another one which is taken for granted, discussion. So any idea, and I would like to interact with you people now. So could anyone of us tell me something about what is the purpose for writing discussion? Anyone?
Sir, can I speak, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sir, discussion is the connecting link between the results and the conclusion, is
Okay.
what I understand. I may be totally wrong because I haven't read anywhere. I just felt
No, no.
that how, because the results we obtain through analysis or quantitative analysis, qualitative, whatever it is, and after
Yeah.
that, how deriving from the results we reach to the conclusion is
Okay.
what discussion talks about,
Okay.
according to.
Okay. So
Uh, so,
all right, let me just say something. I mean, partly yes, but only thing would be, Seema, something regarding the conclusions regarding what, right? So conclusion from what reference point, and that's where I'll just add some more things to what you have said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Anyone else? I think
so,
Vineet, Mrs. Smita. Yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
discussion is that part wherein we are trying to reason out why the results came. So we are giving something in support of the results,
Okay.
like what led to these results, what could have led to these results, or what are the yeah, that one.
Okay. So why these results came and what led to these results and all. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. Vineet, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I was thinking that discussion would encompass the initial position which researcher has took, like in the motivation he had.
Okay.
So from that standpoint, how
Uh-huh.
these results can be viewed. So
Okay.
basically, discussion would include some opinions on by the researcher on these results from the
Okay.
standpoint he or she had.
Okay. So thanks to all three of you. In fact, you have touched certain things, all of which would be important. But then the overarching purpose of writing discussion is very simple. Please recall that you came up to research questions, right, for some reason. There are two strong reasons for doing any good scientific research. One is gaps in the literature. Okay. So you find that, okay, certain things have been said, and you have some strong reasons to say that no, there are certain more things which lies in between, which may explain these unexplained things and all things like that. The other thing is important issue that we are facing. For example, the vaccines are important to be made, right? So this comes from the need of the conditions that we live our lives in. So vaccines is one medical sort of research that one goes into. Similarly, when you look at human science or social science or management research, you may find that besides the gaps in the literature, there are some very, very strong, uh, patterns or issues that you see all around you, okay, which are very, very critical to be addressed. Even if literature has been, literature has been devoted to that, or some work has been done or not, that is something which has its own purpose, right? But besides that, another strong reason is this, where you see that there is some pragmatic purpose of it in terms of addressing issues, addressing some of the urgent needs of humankind or society, or maybe a set of people many a time taken to be, their voices being marginalized, poverty, other kinds of issues. Discussion allows you to again go back to the reason for which you did this research. Okay, so you saw a gap. I mean, in this work which you are doing for your end sem assignment, we simply were interested in knowing something about people's life, which generally is not taken up, right? So more in terms of, let us say, a sense of exploration that you had, right? And that's what led you to write about that. That's what led you to pick up this kind of exploration, which was partly also designed by your teacher or instructor in the course. That's a different thing. But then think of an actual research, actual in the sense that something where you actually follow most of these things, beginning with either the gaps in the literature, or you pick certain important issues that have to be addressed. Now, discussion is all about trying to tell the world that to what extent or in what manner your findings could help you address those gaps. Okay. And that's what you write in detail. So, in what nuanced manner you have added something new that helps you bridge that gap that you for which you actually did your research. Number one. Number two, if your work was based on, and most of the work, important work within human science, which is taken up with the help of qualitative or ethnographic research, somewhere addresses the important issues, right? Which you see in the discipline may or may not be actually addressed, may have been neglected, and you want to take it up because it's critical for the human society or human lives or a set of people. As simple as that. Now, with the help of your findings, to what extent you could address that issue, or to what extent you could bridge that gap that you found in the literature, right? So the entire, I would say, nucleus or the entire core of discussion moves around that. Okay, that's the reason why you go back to you begin your discussion with the fact that we began this work in search of. Okay, we began this work to address, and what did you address? Again, the gaps that you saw in the literature, or the issues which were impending, which were very, very critical to be addressed. And then it is followed by how your findings could help address either of these gaps, either this gap or the issues that you wanted to which were very, very critical for you to be addressed as a researcher. So that's the meaning of discussion, and that's why many a time people who are in a hurry simply go to the discussion part, because that gives more or less a summary of how it started, okay, and in what ways the findings have been able to somewhere address some of those gaps or the issues that had to be addressed. And then comes implications, which are more or less about the ways in which the findings could be applied, okay, in certain directions, right? And there are three general directions that you have. One is theoretical. Obviously, when if your research is more inclined towards addressing the gap in the literature or maybe in the theory. So, I mean, definitely, partly it's a repetition there, because you talk about the theoretical implications in terms of what has been achieved and what has to be then taken up in future in that particular direction. That's the theoretical direction of implications that you write. And then comes the methodological one, right? That how certain newer ways or certain flexible, certain innovativeness was a feature of your methodology that you adopted. So that could be one of the implications in terms of methodological newness that you might have brought to your work, in terms of whole lot of flexibility that you have. I just talked about how I had a choice of presenting my finding with the help of category, but it was never done. Seldom done within grounded theory research. But I chose a sort of way to do that because I had a rationale for that. So that comes up as the methodological implications of, if you followed this innovativeness of the, if you took up this flexibility, utilize that flexibility, how did that inform the movement towards insights with the help of the methodological novelty that you brought to the work, or which was a part of your work. And then finally is the applied one, more in terms of uh, in what manner certain the stakeholders and their lives could be touched or could be contributed to, whether it is engineering or whether it is sciences or humanities and social sciences. So these are the things that you happen to do as far as the discussion is concerned, where we look at the whole reason why you chose certain kinds of research objectives, right? And then you address the whole question of how your findings have been able to address, those gaps or those issues. And that's where you bring in a whole lot of work which have already been done or which may be pointing out in somewhat similar direction perhaps, but again you got to show that what new you have been able to contribute there, because you are talking about bridging the gap, theoretical gap somewhere. And then so it is also written in a very nuanced manner, because you may find certain contradictory theories or findings too, but you got to situate your findings in terms of how your work contributes to bridge the gap. And then implications more in terms of how the voices of people, how certain things that were neglected, how certain issues which apparently seem to be taken for granted, but yet very, very critical in terms of people's life. So you talk about how those silenced voices could be provided some space, and how it brings in a whole lot of clarity regarding their issues. It could be related to one's selfhood, identity, well-being. It could be related to their day-to-day, hassles at various, levels of hierarchies that they face in their lives and things like that. Okay, and then implications, as I said, more in terms of the different directions that the findings indicate in terms of theoretical, the methodological direction, and the applied one, more in terms of the potential use of that, the new findings for the stakeholders. Okay, and then references. I don't have much to say here because there are different ways it is written. One is APA, American Psychological Association, which I think many of the disciplines, including sciences and engineering, they tend to follow that style. And there is Chicago, manual, which is also followed in literature and maybe other disciplines too. So that's not a big thing. But then the fact remains that you got to be certain regarding giving the reference list, which comes up, at the end of the report, because anyone who is reading your introduction or method or result or discussion may like to get more and more informed regarding the studies that you have cited there for methodology, for results, or for discussion, and for introduction. So that's where it also becomes it provides a coherent, I would say, picture to the entire work, because it is quite helpful to any reader who is interested in taking the work, or who is able to utilize your work for one's own learning, or for one's own research. Okay, you never know. Practically, there are times when you read some classical work, you tend to know about other ones which are which have been cited there, right? And you might have missed that, many of those. So, currently I'm working on a book, and I'm writing one of the chapters in that. And when I'm reading, it's like, always an aha experience that, okay, my goodness, had I not taken up this project of book writing, many things I might have missed, which are so contemporary. Anyway, so we travel in the same boat. You guys are in this course and trying to learn. I'm also trying to learn different ways to do and convey the findings, communicate the findings, and all. So this is it from my side. And I'll be sending this article to all of us, and I think this recording also, which might be helpful. And then the other article, I don't know how all of us are placed, but if you want, I would request some of you to make a presentation. That's all about doing research on sensitive topics. If you want, you can make a presentation on that. Someone can volunteer, or you may read it on your own, because that's something which might be useful for us at times, if you feel that some of your work is something that somewhere touches human lives, and uh, to that extent, it does become a question also about how you yourself were affected by that, right? So, for example, any good work on human subjective experiences, for example, this COVID thing. There are times when it does become distressing or stressful for us, right? Some of my students who took this course from other disciplines, other departments, they also told us that no, it's not just true about human science. It could also be about any other research which is very, very much rigorous, and we got to take care of ourselves as a researcher. Anyway, so that I'll send, and that's it from my side. I'll wish you all the best.
Sir, a quick clarificatory
Yeah,
question
go
on this
go
slide.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Sir, can you please help me understand this paradigmatic standpoint versus research paradigm? I was thinking that in the introduction itself, I'll mention that what's the
Okay.
paradigm. So
Okay.
I'm confused right now, like how it is different.
Okay, so let me quickly clarify that these actually mean the same. There are times when you briefly mention that in introduction, because when I write in a flow, okay, that okay, this is where I come from. This is my prior experience as a researcher or whatever, and coming to these sort of uh, questions, was possible because of these kinds of inclinations that I had. So you write about those inclinations, also paradigmatic ones, but then you provide greater details of that in the section which is given below. So I would say it's more about the reason related to the flow of your writing that I mentioned it there, right? But the point remains that the paradigmatic standpoint has to be written, and written in greater detail in your methodology section, right? Does that help?
Yeah, sir, because it's basis the topic or the research question, I'll take certain standpoint. I
Yeah,
may have some experience, prior experience, which
right.
is like framing my standpoint,
Hmm.
but still I should be more concerned that what is the demand of the research question.
Right. So let me throw some light on that once again. See, the way you would, I mean, in the introduction, you'll be talking about these ideas, right? What are these ideas? Before that, you'll be talking about what led you to that those ideas, right? Motivational or the experiential one. And within that, there will be some glimpses of your paradigmatic leanings too. So, for example, if I'm talking about, let us say, COVID-19 and how, uh, I mean, people's mental health and how the, the background of people who have been affected by that, becomes so critical. And background would also mean, again, the social, relational, and political one. I mean, again, it somewhere tells me that the lives of people or experiences of people have to be located within the context. And even without talking about the paradigmatic standpoint, let us say the social constructionist one, still I am giving a clue, giving a sort of hint to myself as well as to the reader when I'm writing that it would require, a kind of openness in terms of how I'm going to view the people's reality. And then when you come to the methodology section, you'll be writing with the help of all the terms and definitions that, okay, how this paradigmatic understanding could help you address the research questions better. So in the method section becomes more sort of formal, or more conceptual.
This is helpful, sir.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Any other thing? Any other question if you have? Okay, I recall Seema's thing. Seema, I'll get back to the article again, and
Okay.
get back to you, with whatever specific answer that I can provide to that. Okay.
Okay, sir.
All right. All right. Thank you.
Sir, I
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
posted a request in chat that could you
Okay.
please extend the date of submission of codes to 24th or 25th, because we were not clear as to what has to be done. Can it be shifted to 24th April or 25th April?
No, I don't understand. Is there some confusion regarding that what we need to write?
Now it's clear, sir. Actually, earlier I was not understanding as to how many sections have to be put. Now I am clear on this after talking to you today.
I see. Okay. Because what I said was that, whatever you could come up with, as the indispensable codes, right, with the help of pulling together the data from both the participants, or maybe, there were more than two participants in some of the groups. So that's what we had to do. I mean, anyway, I mean, I don't know what is the date today, 22nd, right? Okay, so fine.
You had
I
you had
guess
given a date of 23rd, so
yeah,
I'm just requesting you to extend
24.
it by one more day.
Yeah, it's okay. I don't think it should be any problem. There should be any problem with that. I was more concerned about the clarity regarding that, right?
Now I am clear, sir.
Okay, no problem. All right, so 24th, I guess we can share that on this email group itself. And please also include people in the, those who are in the CC, because not all of us are there in that, course list. Okay. All right. So any other quick thing, if you have, please ask, or otherwise, uh, I would say all the best, and um, come what may. I guess you must follow your passion or interest, and that becomes a wonderful journey of research. Research can be rigorous, but research also can be joy, provided it follows your interest. You follow your interest or passion. Okay. All right. Maybe some other time, if we happen to meet, or if you feel the need for classes to discuss something, I'll be open to that. Or the other thing could be that there can be some discussion based classes even for the novel insights that you have developed with the help of your projects or with the help of your research findings in the for the NSEM. So I leave it open to us, because I know that you would need your own time for your project and NSEM. But if you happen to be interested in some discussion related to your projects, right, then, or maybe sharing something novel from your projects, then we can have discussions on that in these slots. Okay. So keep me informed on that, and all the best to all of us. All right?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.